Hey everybody, Fatman here, and welcome to the first installment of a new segment I like to call From Worst to Best. If obviously titled video segments go over your head, then I'll be more specific. This segment is all about taking a franchise, seasons of a TV show, etc., and ranking them from their worst installment up to their best. And today I'm going to be looking at the Harry Potter film franchise. Growing up, and to this day, I was a massive, both figuratively and literally, fan of the Harry Potter book series, idiotic J.K. Rowling Twitter additions aside. The films, however, lost me after a certain point. Whereas some people really adore them, I kind of felt like they declined rapidly in quality after a certain point. At first, I wanted to judge these completely objectively because, after all, a movie is a movie and should be able to stand on its own merits even if it has been adapted from a book. Not only do I feel like some of the films didn't accomplish this, even being judged as just a movie, but I realized due to that inherent bias, it would be damn near impossible for me to look at them that way. For one thing, a film that some people may feel is terrific all on its own, I may absolutely dislike, as you'll see with the first entry on the list. This really only boils down to my dislike coming because I've read the books. And had I not, I may have looked at some of these as perfectly fine films. After all, if there is one consistency in the Harry Potter movies, it is that the actors and actresses usually did a pretty damn good job, and the digital effects were always, not you, pretty damn good. Basically, what I'm trying to say with all of this is that I'm going to be incorporating reasons for why a film lands where it does based on my knowledge of the book series. So take that as you will. Also, I'm not doing Fantastic Beasts because nope. So without further ado, this is From Worst to Best, Harry Potter Edition. Number 8, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Yeah, many of the Harry Potter fans I know really like this one, and I didn't really care for it at all. Ironically, Order of the Phoenix is my favorite book out of the whole series. A constant theme through this list is that obviously the movies couldn't have incorporated everything from the books, but I take more of an issue on the liberties they took with choosing what to include and what to exclude. The darker tone from the fourth film definitely carries over in this one, and while the wizarding world was indeed in turmoil at this point in time, there are almost no lighthearted moments to be found, which takes away from the whimsical feeling the franchise was initially rooted in. I really wanted to see Neville's backstory explored here, and even if just for a few minutes, find out something about Frank and Alice Longbottom. Again, I understand that everything from the books can't be included, but put in Order of the Phoenix and skip 45 minutes ahead, and you'll find yourself watching Luna and Harry dick around in the Forbidden Forest with a bunch of Thestrals, which comes off sounding a lot more sexual than I thought it would. So you're going to tell me in this over 2-hour movie, we arrive almost an hour in and we're still at the B story, and A story really hasn't cropped up yet. And we skim over character development for what is, in my opinion, one of the series' most important characters, to watch a contrived court scene that's dragged out far longer than it needed to be because you already know the outcome. The editing is very choppy, which ruins scenes like when Nagini attacks Arthur in the Department of Mysteries. The pacing is all over the damn place, and ultimately I was just extremely frustrated and let down with this one. The one thing I will give this movie definite props for is that Imelda Staunton really is brilliant as Umbridge, and Ivana Lynch as Luna Lovegood should basically be considered a national treasure at this point. Number 7. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. If there is one thing I hope we can all agree on, it's that this movie can go to hell for inspiring Hollywood to split up single stories into 2 films. People have thrown the argument that movies have been split up into parts before, and yeah, no shit. Let's take Godfather Part 2 or Back to the Future Part 2. Those are sequels. I can't believe this has to be explained. You get a satisfying conclusion with a solid beginning, middle, and end. A new story is told in those sequels, and while they are part of an overarching story, they can stand on their own. This is literally one movie split in half. And of all the things to really incorporate from the books, they seriously kept the boring-ass camping shit that was even dull in the book itself. You're telling me that couldn't have been cut down at all? The world is exploding around them, but sure, Harry and Hermione have time to dance, I guess. At least it was a really good tease for when they wind up together at the end of the... Oh. The film falls really flat for me, and I'm sorry, but I also have to take issue with Dobby's death. This is an example of small cuts throughout the franchise taking a toll here at the end. At this point, we haven't actually seen Dobby since the second movie, where he essentially just showed up and was a massive dick to Harry the entire time. The big emotional payoff doesn't work quite as well as in the book series, where Dobby was sprinkled throughout nearly every installment after he was initially introduced. All in all, this film is all build up and no payoff, and that's just not a way to do a movie. Number 6, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Yeah, these two films could easily be flip-flop for me, but I prefer this one because essentially it gets to the point a lot quicker. That being said, it suffers on the flip side from its predecessor because this one is all payoff and no setup. The stakes just don't feel as high as they should be for the final film in an 8-part franchise, because we saw the first part of it over a year ago at this point. Add on to that the really insulting way they chose to portray Fred's death, spoilers by the way, it adds insult to injury because, let's be honest, he's pretty much a universal favorite. Voldemort also has one of the least satisfying deaths I've ever seen in film. But aside from that, many of the actual duels themselves are pretty fun to watch, and while nothing here really comes as close as Lord of the Rings scale, it is definitely on a bigger scale than anything we've seen in this franchise before. Number 5, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. In my opinion, this film had decent intent and fair pacing, but I feel like we lose that halfway through the movie for rom-com levels of ridiculousness. I understand that they didn't want to portray another big battle at the end of this movie since we were having a huge battle coming up with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, but then that got split into 2 installments and we had to wait a year and a half to see the resolution, so the point stands. They try to center more on the kids growing up and falling in love, but they don't really put as much focus as they should on any of the relationships that actually work in the end. We see Ron and Lavender develop a little bit, but we haven't gotten to know Lavender worth shit across this entire franchise. She got recast and nobody even noticed. And we see them kind of tease Harry and Ginny, but considering after this film he spends so much of the rest of this franchise away from her, they really don't hammer it home as well as they should, since they wind up getting married at the end of the franchise. It's not terrible, and it's less offensive to me than some of the ones that came before it on the list, but that's mainly due to downright incredible performances from Alan Rickman, Michael Gambon, and Jim Broadbent. Number 4, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Many people claim this as the worst Harry Potter film, and I can't really see it. The remainder of this list are films that I actually liked in this franchise, and Chamber of Secrets is no exception. All the magic and wonderment from the first film is carried over well here, it's wonderfully written, and I feel like the kids are growing more into their roles as the Golden Trio in this movie. It does contain some moments of darker tone shifts, but I feel like it's a perfect example of how to balance the whimsy and magic from the first one along with the darker stuff coming on later in the franchise. Does it maybe play it a bit too safe? Yeah, I guess I could see that. But I feel like this was early on enough to the films weren't guaranteed to be the massive successes we know them today, so it makes sense that it played it safe. What I really can't understand is how Arthur Weasley, who works for the government, doesn't recognize probably the most popular wizard of the era sitting at his dinner table. Somebody explain that shit to me. Number 3, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This was the final film in this franchise that I actually fully enjoyed, and revisiting it, yeah, I could say I still feel the same way. Thematically, it's terrific, and really eases you into the tone shifts without kind of throwing you to the wolves. The consistency and the pacing here are top-notch in my opinion, and the viewer really comes to understand over the runtime that we're starting to move away from the kid-friendly stuff and in a darker territory continuing onward. It's done in a very logical way. And the new characters are all pretty enjoyable, even though Barty Jr.'s plan is kind of convoluted shit, but that's really more of a fault of the book than it is the movie. I always loved the concept of the Triwizard Tournament, and that's carried over exceptionally well. The stylistic decisions are captivating, and for being almost all a singular color scheme, the visuals are a treat to watch without it ever feeling too mundane. My only real complaint is that they opt to tell you rather than show you in a few instances, including the Quidditch World Cup, which we don't get to see any of, and the other champions' battles against their dragons. But all things considered, the film works well for me. Number 2, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. What can I say? I have a major soft spot for the first film. It's basically dessert for the eyes. The visuals are bright and expressive and leap off the screen. There are so many things to absorb and look at. The feeling you are entering a new world is really impressed on the viewer. And there's just such a unique style about it that it's a shame that the back half of these films lose that. The child actors here can be a little wooden, but who the hell wouldn't be at such a young age entering this monster franchise? Robbie Coltrane is especially amazing as Hagrid here, and many of the cast members quickly build a trust that they're going to be able to carry this juggernaut for however long these movies are going to continue. Christopher Columbus, after discovering America, settled down to direct the first 2 movies, and he just does such a professional job that it's still one of my favorite Potters to this day. And finally, number 1, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. We finally arrive at the end, and even though I've obviously thought about this and written it down and seen the movie, I still find it a little weird that this one, out of all of them, is my number 1 favorite, because generally, I really, really hate time travel. And to that point, I don't feel like it's something handled insanely well in this movie either. But that being said, the storytelling is definitely upped from the previous 2 movies. The twists all are surprising and fit into the context of what's been established in this franchise so far. We get a lot of character backstory and character development, and start to form actual connections with all of these characters. The Marauders are introduced, and let's be honest, they're all just really, really awesome characters. The film has a completely different feel, a completely different look, and it all just works so well together. And after Chamber of Secrets was seen as kind of stagnating, local Frenchman Alfonso Cuarón, or however it is you pronounce that, takes the chair from Christopher Columbus and completely changes the shift of these films. And I'm okay with that, because this new direction is very welcome. Prisoner of Azkaban retains some of the lightheartedness from the previous 2 films, but adds real stakes in a much darker undertone, and it just builds upon the other 2 so well. I'm not going to pretend that this has nothing to do with Sirius Black being one of my favorite characters in, anything, but ultimately, to this day, this is still my favorite Harry Potter film. So that was Harry Potter from worst to best. Let me know what you think. Did you agree or disagree with any of the rankings here, and what are your personal ones? I know how absolutely batshit crazy this fandom can be, so feel free to let out the rage that's been building since you clicked on this video into the comments below. For ZeitgeistOG, I am Fatman, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that stupid ass bell to stay updated, and we will catch you next time.